Elena had always believed there was magic to be found in the kitchen. Even as a child, perched on a stool beside her grandmother's battered wooden cutting board, she would watch every swirl of a wooden spoon or flourish of a pinch of salt as though it were part of some ancient, enchanting ritual. By the time she was a teenager, the fragrance of simmering rosemary and thyme felt as familiar to her as her own reflection in the mirror. While she yearned to become a renowned chef, she settled for working long hours in small, family owned restaurants, dedicating herself to her craft with unwavering devotion. It was in the kitchen of a humble neighborhood bistro, the Moonlight Spoon, that Alina's journey took an unexpected turn. Late one evening, after the dinner rush had subsided, she lingered behind to tidy the kitchen. The last table had been cleared and the staff had gone home. In the soft glow of the overhead lights, she methodically wiped down the counters, rinsed the cutting boards, and stacked trays of clean plates. Her eyes were heavy with fatigue, but her heart was content. There was a comforting hum in her mind whenever she was left alone to tend to the tools of her trade. On a shelf in the far corner of the kitchen sat a neglected cardboard box, its flaps splitting at the edges. Elena had noticed it before, but never gave it much thought. It was a busy place, and old boxes filled with forgotten paraphernalia weren't unusual. This particular night, however, something about it caught her attention, an energy she couldn't quite name. The moment she placed her hand on the box, she felt a subtle warmth, as if it had been sitting in a patch of bright sunlight all day. Curiosity nudged her to open it. Inside, she found faded linens, questionable utensils long out of use, and at the bottom, something that looked like a hard-covered ledger. Its cover was stained with splotches of differing colors, as though it had been present in multiple kitchens for countless years. She picked it up carefully, brushing off dust that rose in a small cloud. The title, if it could be called that, was nearly illegible, but she managed to make out the words, Hope and Recipes. The rest of the text had faded beyond recognition. Elena shrugged her shoulders. It seemed to be a recipe book, but there was something different. Its pages felt softer, somehow lit from within. She didn't recall seeing anything like it, and she couldn't imagine how it had languished in such an unremarkable corner. Taking it in her arms, she felt an inexplicable pull to bring the book home. That night, she propped herself up in bed, with the recipe book open on her lap. Each page was filled with handwritten recipes, though the corners of the pages were creased and the ink had bled in places. She scanned the first few recipes: Grandma's healing vegetable broth, midnight chocolate comfort cake, sunlit basil risotto. The instructions were straightforward, but alongside each ingredient list and method, there were small scribbled notes in the margins. Heals a broken heart, brings warmth on lonely nights, reminds one of home. It was as though each recipe promised more than nourishment for the body. It offered solace, hope, or encouragement, as if it possessed powers near to enchantment. The more Elena read, the more intrigued she became. She fancied herself a realist. Magic belonged in fairy tales, but she couldn't deny the profoundly calming effect reading these recipes had on her. A sense of possibility bloomed in her chest, a spark she had nearly forgotten she carried. Though she was exhausted, she stayed awake late into the night, devouring every word. In the days that followed, strange coincidences began to occur. Elena decided to try one of the book's recipes for her personal lunch break at the bistro. She chose comforting lentil soup, partly because it required simple ingredients: onions, garlic, carrots, celery, lentils, stock, and a few herbs. The recipe was accompanied by a note that read, "Soothes the worried mind, stirs the heart to open up." Skeptical though she was, Elena followed the instructions meticulously, measuring out spices down to the pinch. She simmered the soup, letting it cook slowly, the aromas filling the air and beckoning curiosity from the restaurant's staff. When the soup was finally ready, Elena tasted a spoonful. Anticipating it to be good, she prided herself on fine-tuning seasonings, but her expectations were met with something unexpectedly extraordinary. The soup felt harmonious. Each flavor was not just balanced, it felt alive with warmth, creating a sublime comfort that spread from her taste buds to her very spirit. A wave of unexpected relief washed over her, as though the worries she had been carrying about her future, about her ability, melted away, replaced by renewed confidence. It sounded impossible, but the evidence was right there on her tongue. Elena shared a bowl with Chantel, the sous chef, who was notorious for her high-strung demeanor. As Chantel slurped the first spoonful, her tight shoulders seemed to soften, and her anxious eyes slowly relaxed. She smiled, a gentle, almost childlike smile. "This tastes like home," she murmured. Like, I don't have to worry about everything for a moment. Word traveled quickly through the kitchen. Even the dishwasher, Marcus, who rarely tried anything beyond the staff meals, wanted a taste. He exclaimed that the soup reminded him of his grandmother's Sunday afternoon lunches on her farm. "I haven't thought of my grandmother in years," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Now I remember how safe I felt with her." Elena couldn't wrap her mind around the phenomenon, but she recognized that something extraordinary was brewing. Steadily, she started experimenting with more recipes from the mysterious book. She tested their effect on regular customers who came to the bistro. There was the Brave Morning Muffin recipe, made with blueberries and lemon zest, that promised to embolden anyone who tasted it to see the day with fresh eyes. Her unsuspecting patrons praised the muffin's bright flavor, but more than that, they'd leave the restaurant beaming as if someone had handed them good news. "I feel oddly optimistic," one customer remarked, surprising himself, like something good is just around the corner. Meanwhile, Elena searched for clues as to the cookbook's origins, combing through the restaurant's archives, questioning her boss Claudia, who inherited the bistro from her late father. But no one had ever heard of a treasured, hope-filled cookbook. A few weeks went by, and all she knew was that the book was old, lovingly used, and in some indefinable way imbued with grace. As much as she longed to uncover its past, she was even more enthralled by the ability it gave her to uplift people. Although she hesitated to discuss it openly, fearful that others might dismiss it as a gimmick, she couldn't deny the transformation happening right before her eyes. The change wasn't limited to those who ate her dishes. Elena herself started noticing a fresh wave of confidence surging through her daily life. She was sleeping better, waking up in the morning with eagerness to face the day, and most importantly, she finally felt she was living her call to be a chef in the most meaningful way possible. For Elena, cooking was never just about blending flavors. It was about telling stories, evoking memories, and forging connections that transcended language. Soon, rumors of a special kind of comfort food at the Moonlight Spoon spread through the neighborhood. More customers appeared each day. Tucked away inside the small bistro, they found respite from various troubles: heartbreak, family disputes, job anxieties. In the hush of candlelight, they ate Alina's careful creations and walked out with a certain glow that defied explanation. Some credited the skillful chef, others guessed that it must be a hidden ingredient, and a few dared to whisper about magic. As demand grew, Elena found herself at a crossroads. She knew that to keep up, she would need more help and better ingredients. She approached Claudia with the news. "We have to expand the menu. People are traveling from across town just to taste these recipes, but we need more staff, more space if we're to serve everyone." Claudia was initially hesitant. "Elena, I'm thrilled about our success, but we're a small bistro. I'm worried about overextending ourselves." Still, Elena's contagious enthusiasm eventually won her over. Another sous chef was hired, the pantry was reorganized, and the bistro's dining hours extended. Every night, Elena carefully planned how best to incorporate the recipes, sometimes with little twists of her own. She was learning that she could add to the magic by trusting her instincts: an extra dash of nutmeg, a fresh garnish of basil, and each dish seemed to resonate with authenticity. Amid the flurry of success, Elena felt a growing urge to do more than just feed those who could afford a fine meal. She remembered an old homeless shelter in her neighborhood, a place she walked by on her way home from work. The people who visited it wouldn't have the means to dine at her restaurant. She wanted to share this strange, wondrous gift with them too. Even as she thrived under the bistro's spotlight, she couldn't shake the memory of individuals holding tattered signs or hands outstretched for spare change. And so she made a choice. On her day off, she filled cardboard boxes with fresh produce, stock, herbs, and a few packs of bread. The recipe she planned to cook from the book was titled New Dawn Stew, described as for those who need to see the start of something good. She loaded her supplies into her aging car and drove to the shelter. The administrators greeted her with cautious smiles. Donations were common, but rarely did someone come with an intention to cook from scratch. Elena rolled up her sleeves, pinned a hairnet around her dark curls, and took over the shelter's modest kitchen. She aligned her ingredients with deliberate care, following the recipe exactly. Browning the onions until they were golden, stirring in carrots, potatoes, beans, a little chili powder for warmth, and a handful of fresh herbs promising renewal. All the while, she recited her own silent hope that each steaming bowl might bring comfort, perhaps even a spark of self-belief, to those who needed it most. Before long, a line formed. Several families waited patiently, grateful for warm food. As Elena and shelter volunteers ladled out the stew, soft gasps of delight passed among the guests. A bright-eyed boy in a worn sweater exclaimed, "It tastes like a hug!" His mother, looking exhausted but hopeful, gently whispered her thanks to Elena. An older man who had recently lost his job couldn't stop praising the flavors. Over the next hour, Elena witnessed what she could only describe as subtle transformations. Timid gazes lifted and hushed voices turned melodic with laughter. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. Whatever mysterious magic the cookbook contained, she wanted to dedicate herself to using it for good. News of Elena's volunteer work spread, weaving her reputation into something larger than a talented chef. Her life became a balancing act between the bistro's bustling success and her passion for giving back. She realized that with the cookbook's help, she was doing more than just creating extraordinary meals. She was building bonds in a fractured community, reminding them life could still be full of wonder and comfort. During one hectic evening at the Moonlight Spoon, Sophia, a local journalist, arrived with a camera in tow. Elena had seen her name before. Sophia wrote thoughtful pieces that focused on community stories that evoked empathy. Over dinner, she pulled Elena aside. "I've been hearing remarkable tales about your cooking," Sophia said, awe twinkling in her eyes. "People claim they feel better, calmer, stronger after dining here. Families say it saved their relationships. Even some staff say they're more at ease. What's your secret?" Elena wanted to share the truth, but a part of her hesitated. Would people believe the story of a magical cookbook? Or would they dismiss it as a silly fantasy? Perhaps they'd accuse her of pulling a publicity stunt for attention. Her gaze flicked to the kitchen, where the cookbook was carefully tucked away on a shelf. She realized in that moment she didn't want to keep it secret, nor did she want to sensationalize it. She believed honesty was the essence of good cooking. Why not be honest now? Taking a quiet breath, she led Sophia to the kitchen. Gently picking up the worn recipe book, she opened it to a page describing mend all macaroni, complete with hearts doodled in. "I can't fully explain it," she began softly. "But somehow, the recipes in this book carry hope. Whenever I cook from it, something changes. It's as if each dish has the power to heal and inspire." Sophia was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded with a small smile. "I believe you. Sometimes the world needs something unexplainable, something that makes us think about the ways we can help each other heal." She closed her notepad gently, as if sealing in the words. "I'd like to share your story, but I promise to do it from the heart. People deserve to know that hope can be found in the most unexpected places." Elena was nervous to see how the future would turn out. When Sophia's article finally appeared online and in print a week later, it focused not on sensational magic, but on how Elena's cooking had become a catalyst for community well-being. Sophia's empathetic portrayal showed Elena in her element, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, serving bowls of comforting stews and soups to grateful souls in need of nourishment, both physical and emotional. While the article mentioned the mysterious origin of the recipe book, it didn't dwell on it in a way that could invite cynicism or ridicule. Instead, it emphasized the acts of kindness, the thoughtfulness of preparing meals with hope in mind. The response was overwhelming. Letters arrived at the Moonlight Spoon addressed to Elena, some from strangers living in other cities. They shared stories of personal struggles, asking if she could share a recipe that might help them find courage or mend a relationship. While Elena couldn't physically cook for everyone who reached out, she copied pages from the book, adapted them with her own notes, and sent them off with well wishes. Although she could not guarantee that someone else cooking from these pages would produce the same effect, she believed that the simple act of cooking with pure intention might bring people closer to the heart of real nourishment, love, empathy, togetherness. The bistro soon became a meeting spot not just for fine dining, but for support groups, small gatherings of friends seeking comfort, and even couples hoping to soothe tension. Eventually, other chefs and restaurateurs started showing up, eager to see if this rumored magic was something they could learn. Though none could replicate the precise recipes from Elena's cookbook, they discovered that their own cooking improved when they focused on the joy it could bring others rather than just perfect presentation or profit margins. It sparked a conversation around town about what went into creating food that nurtured the spirit as well as the body. Still, Elena felt compelled to dig deeper into the cookbook's past. The transformations it inspired were undeniable, but she wanted to honor its true legacy. Late after closing one night, she found herself gently tracing her fingertips over the faded inscription on the inside cover. Although most of it was illegible, she could just barely make out what looked like a signature. With a renewed sense of determination, Elena scoured local records, online auction sites, and library archives in search of anything referencing a Catherine Whitaker and a unique recipe book. Slowly, bits and pieces began to emerge. She discovered an old newspaper article dated some 40 years prior, describing a beloved traveling cook named Kate Whitaker, known for sharing comfort through her dishes wherever she went. The more Elena found, the more she suspected that her recipe book might indeed have belonged to this traveling cook. There was mention of a time Catherine Whitaker helped feed displaced families during a crisis, traveling with little more than a battered pot and boxes of fresh produce. People remembered that her soups and stews seemed to calm fears in ways no mere meal ever had. She left behind no known family or significant possessions, only rumors of a special cookbook that seemed to vanish after her passing. Elena felt her emotions rise. She sensed that Catherine had left this cookbook as a final gift to the world, and it had chosen Elena as its caretaker. Overcome with gratitude, she made a vow she would carry on Catherine's legacy, using her skill to feed not just appetites but hearts. She would keep paying the gift forward, as it seemed the cookbook was meant for anyone with the spirit to embrace hope. At times, the pressure mounted. Newfound fame and constant demand tested Elena's endurance. She sometimes worried the magic might wear off, or that she was unworthy of the responsibility. In these moments, she'd flip to one of the earliest pages in the cookbook where Catherine had written a simple note: "Cook with your heart open. Whatever you place in your pot will reflect the love within you." It was a short line, but it braced Elena's spirit whenever doubts sprouted. Cooking was an act of generosity, and this was a truth she would carry forward for as long as she could grip a spoon. Years passed, and the Moonlight Spoon outgrew its modest space. With Claudia's blessing, they bought the neighboring property, expanding into a two-story establishment that housed a dedicated soup kitchen on the ground level. Elena trained other chefs, not just in technique, but in the importance of approaching each dish with genuine care. The original recipe book sat in a glass case, displayed as an emblem of the bistro's heart and soul. While it wasn't locked away from use, the staff referred to it often. It was treated with reverence. Anyone who entered was welcome to read from it, to see the scribbled notes of encouragement and the worn corners that bore witness to decades of compassionate cooking. Whenever Elena had a spare moment, she'd quietly slip into the kitchen of the adjacent soup kitchen to help volunteers prepare a comforting meal for those in need. Often she made the same new dawn stew or tested another dish from the time-worn pages. She never shied away from explaining that the real magic came from the kindness in each volunteer's hands, the sincerity in their stirring and seasoning. The cookbook was a guide, but the transformation was born from shared dedication and empathy, shining through every ladle of soup. Eventually, Elena's story became known well beyond her community. Other aspiring chefs wrote letters, traveled in person, or requested internship opportunities at the bistro. Some offered to purchase the cookbook outright, wealthy collectors viewing it as a rare artifact. Elena politely declined all such offers. She trusted that the book's purpose was for it to be used, not hidden away in someone's private library. And again, she would repeat that it was not about the price tag, but the promise of hope. Guests continued to stream into the newly renovated Moonlight Spoon from places far and wide. They came with burdens and left with a sense of lightness they could hardly put into words. Families mended old feuds, lonely hearts found companionship in the communal table, and friendships formed over bowls of fragrant soups and crusty bread fresh from the oven. The atmosphere pulsed with an intangible warmth that wrapped itself around every visitor. Through it all, Elena remained humble. She was neither a sorceress nor a saint. She was simply a chef whose heart leapt at seeing others nourished and comforted. She stood by the stoves, stirring pots with the same wonder she had felt as a young girl learning at her grandmother's side. Each creation carried a rich history, the centuries of culinary traditions, Catherine Whitaker's handwritten wisdom, and the newfound devotion Elena poured into every spoonful. Over time, she noticed that while the recipes still carried their inexplicable power, simply holding the book or reading from it now felt like a silent conversation with Catherine herself. As Elena's own life experiences multiplied, it was as though she was adding new notes to the margins, continuing a legacy of compassion and community. She had grown from a timid, aspiring cook into a person who understood that food could be so much more than the sum of its parts. A single bowl of soup could become a saving grace in someone's darkest hour. Late one evening, after the last customer left and the staff had said their goodnights, Elena found herself wandering over to the cookbook's glass case. She lifted the lid softly, retrieving the treasured pages as if greeting an old friend. She turned to one of the earliest recipes, Grandma's healing vegetable broth. A recipe so simple in its composition, yet profound in effect. She thought of her own grandmother, the stoic but tender woman who first taught her the value of nurturing others through food. She recalled Catherine Whitaker and her legacy, and she felt immense gratitude for the gift she'd been given, not just the book, but the chance to discover her purpose in life. As Elena turned out the kitchen lights, she paused before locking up. There was no telling how many more hearts could be mended, how many more souls could be lifted. But one thing was certain. Her journey was far from over. As long as she had the courage to cook with love and hope, these recipes, however mysteriously powerful, would continue changing lives. And in a world that often felt cold and uncertain, that promise was enough.